The courtroom cameras caught the instant confidence turned into raw panic. Corinne Stevens walked in like a movie star entering her own premiere, neck brace gleaming white under the studio lights, blonde hair curled into immaculate waves, a slight limp that looked practiced rather than painful. She was the picture of a woman wronged by fate. Every sigh, every tilt of her chin had been timed with the precision of a Broadway performance. In one hand, she held a thick folder bulging with medical records. In the other, she pressed her palm against her lower back as though simply standing upright was an act of bravery. To the audience, it looked like tragedy. To Judge Judy, it looked like theater. Corinne didn't know it yet, but in less than 5 minutes she would expose herself so completely that her name would become synonymous with courtroom humiliation. Millions would replay the moment frame by frame, the precise second her smirk vanished, the exact breath when her eyes widened, realizing that the world had just watched her destroy her own case. Corinne Stevens had walked into court believing she couldn't lose. For 5 years, she had made a career out of pretending to be a victim. She had faked pain, forged documents, and wept on cue, all for profit. A grocery cart bump had once earned her $18,000. A staged fall at an Italian restaurant brought her $22,000. A malfunctioning automatic door from a local hardware store paid out another $15,000. Each case had followed the same script: sue, cry, collect, disappear. Today's lawsuit, though, was her masterpiece. A $50,000 claim against a 73-year-old grocer named Robert Chen, whose biggest crime was being kind enough not to fight back too hard. She accused him of causing severe and permanent whiplash after a gentle parking lot fender tap that barely nudged either vehicle. Robert Chen was the polar opposite of his accuser, humble, quiet, and visibly nervous. He'd come to America decades ago with almost nothing, building his little corner grocery from the ground up. His shop wasn't just a business, it was a meeting place, a lifeline for neighbors who couldn't afford big box prices. When customers were short on cash, he let them pay later. When food was left unsold, he donated it to shelters. Now he sat hunched in the defendant's chair, his wrinkled hands gripping his knees, terrified that this lawsuit might destroy everything he'd spent 40 years building. The footage of the accident told a very different story from Corinne's claims. Cameras outside the store showed her SUV slowly rolling backward, barely touching Robert's parked sedan. The bump was so soft that even the dust on his bumper barely shifted, but Corinne had leapt from her car as though struck by lightning. At first, she was fine, walking around briskly, chatting, bending, pointing, even laughing. 20 minutes later, she returned wearing a neck brace and clutching her back like she'd survived an explosion. The transformation was worthy of an award. Unfortunately for her, Robert's cameras caught everything before, during, and after the injury. And unfortunately for her lawyer, Judge Judy had already watched the footage in its entirety the night before. When the bailiff called the court to order, a ripple of anticipation spread through the audience. Judge Judy sat motionless, eyes sharp, expression unreadable. Corinne settled into the plaintiff's chair like a seasoned performer taking center stage. She adjusted her brace for maximum visibility, placed a tissue box nearby, arranged her documents just so, and turned on her soft, sympathetic expression. Her attorney, Gerald Mitchell, looked exhausted, the kind of man who'd spent too long defending cases he didn't quite believe in. Judge Judy began in her usual no-nonsense tone. "Miss Stevens," she said evenly, "you're suing Mr. Chen for $50,000. Explain exactly what happened when his vehicle supposedly struck yours." Simple question, deadly trap. Corinne took a delicate breath as though every inhale was painful. "Your Honor, I was sitting perfectly still in my car when, out of nowhere..." She threw both arms dramatically into the air to demonstrate the violent impact. Her head tilted back, her neck stretched, her gaze following her raised hands. And just like that, the lie shattered. The room went still. Judge Judy's eyebrow rose ever so slightly. The corner of her mouth twitched, not in amusement, but in recognition, the way a cat recognizes the moment its prey reveals a weakness. Corinne's arms froze above her head. Her neck, supposedly immobilized by chronic pain, was extended at a full angle, every muscle working smoothly. Her medical reports claimed she couldn't even look up without agony. For several excruciating seconds, she remained frozen, realizing too late that she had just proven her own fraud on national television. You could hear the hum of the lights, even the court reporter stopped typing. Corinne's arms dropped slowly, her mind scrambled for an excuse. Physical therapy, she stammered. It's, helped a little. I shouldn't move like that. It's painful, but I got caught up trying to show the accident. Judge Judy didn't blink. She simply leaned forward and said quietly, fascinating. According to your medical file, Judy continued, flipping a page, you cannot rotate your neck more than 2 inches. You cannot look up, down, or side to side. And yet just now you raised your arms and craned your head back like you were watching fireworks. That's quite a recovery, Miss Stevens. A few chuckles rippled through the audience before the bailiff's stern glance silenced them. Corinne's lawyer closed his eyes, as though wishing he could disappear. Judge Judy wasn't done. She reached for a folder of printed screenshots. Let's look at the parking lot footage, shall we? She held up the first image. This is the moment of contact. Neither car moved an inch. That's your vehicle tapping Mr. Chen's parked sedan, barely a tremor, yet you claim it caused permanent neck damage. A second photo followed. 30 seconds later, you're walking normally, no brace, no limp, no discomfort. A third, here you are bending forward at roughly 60 degrees to check your bumper, quite flexible for someone supposedly injured. Corinne tried to speak. Your Honor, whiplash can take hours. Judy raised a hand, cutting her off mid-sentence. Don't interrupt me. Corinne's mouth snapped shut. At 2:52 p.m., Judy continued, you turned your head completely around to yell something at Mr. Chen. 2 minutes later, you bent to pick up your phone and stood without assistance. You didn't even use your hands for balance. Remarkable. Each line landed like a hammer blow. Corinne swallowed hard, her confident posture deflated. Then Judge Judy set the photos aside and lifted another folder, thicker than the rest. Now let's discuss your history, she said, because Ms. Stevens. This isn't your first injury claim, is it? Corinne's color drained, her fingers tightened around her water bottle until it crinkled. Judy opened the file. In 2019, you sued Save More Market for a shopping cart incident, collected $18,000, claimed you couldn't sit more than 20 minutes. That sound familiar? Corinne's lips moved, but no sound came out. In 2021, Judy went on, you sued Bella Italia restaurant for $25,000, alleged a slip and fall. Video evidence showed no slip. They settled anyway for $22,000. The owner, a single mother, later closed her restaurant. In 2022, you targeted Henderson Hardware, claimed an automatic door injured your shoulder, took $15,000. The 78-year-old owner died a few months later. His family believes the stress from your lawsuit contributed. Gasps filled the room. One woman stood and shouted, "You monster!" before the bailiff quietly guided her back to her seat. Corinne's tears began to fall, not the staged kind but real panic. Her lawyer inched away from her. Judge Judy leaned back, and that, Miss Stevens, brings us here. 4 lawsuits in 5 years, all eerily similar, same doctor, same symptoms, same miraculous recoveries. Corinne opened her mouth. Those were real injuries. Quiet, Judy snapped, I'm not finished. She flipped to another document. Dr. Marcus Webb, he's the one who signed every one of your medical reports. Funny thing, he's now under investigation for falsifying injury documentation for insurance claims. He sells diagnoses like candy. The courtroom erupted again. Cameras zoomed in on Corinne's trembling face. And while you claim total disability, Judy added, my investigator found footage of you at a gym last week doing yoga, back bent like a bowstring. 2 days later, you're at the mall carrying 6 heavy shopping bags. Saturday, you're cheering at your son's baseball game, jumping, hugging, moving your neck freely. All within days of filing sworn statements that you can't lift, bend, or turn your head. Corinne's head dropped. The mask was gone. The woman who had entered with theatrical confidence now looked like a ghost. She yanked off her neck brace and tossed it onto the table. The gesture said it all. Her prop had betrayed her. Her voice cracked. Please, Your Honor, I didn't mean to hurt anyone. We're drowning in debt. My husband lost his job. I was desperate. Judge Judy's tone turned glacial. Desperation doesn't justify destruction. You didn't just file false claims, you ruined lives, you bankrupted small businesses, you exploited the system for greed. Corinne's sobs filled the silence. Here's my ruling, Judy concluded. Case dismissed with prejudice. You will pay Mr. Chen's legal fees totaling $8,500, and I'm forwarding this transcript and evidence to the district attorney for prosecution. Expect charges for insurance fraud, conspiracy, and perjury, 2 to 5 years in state prison. Karen's wail echoed off the walls. Please, I have children, I'll pay it back, please. Judy's eyes softened. Not at all. You should have thought about them before choosing fraud over honesty. Turning to Robert Chen, she said gently, Mr. Chen, I'm sorry our system allowed this to happen. You're a good man, you've carried yourself with grace. I hope today brings you peace. The old grocer stood, eyes glistening, and bowed. The audience erupted in applause until the gavel struck for order. As bailiffs escorted Karen from the courtroom, her lawyer packed his files in silence, knowing his own career might not survive the fallout. The episode would soon go viral. The courtroom door slammed shut behind Karen Stevens, but the echo seemed to follow her everywhere. It wasn't just the sound of wood against metal, it was the sound of her world collapsing. The bailiff's heavy footsteps trailed her down the hallway as the cameras rolled one last time, capturing the image that would soon circle the internet. The once confident plaintiff, now slumped in defeat, mascara streaking down her face, neck brace dangling from her fingertips like a piece of torn costume. Outside, a small crowd had gathered, reporters, bystanders, and curious fans of Judge Judy who'd managed to slip past security. As the doors opened, the flashes began. Ms. Stevens, Karen, how do you respond to the fraud allegations? Did you really fake your injuries for money? Are you worried about jail time? Karen tried to hide her face, but every angle was already captured. The image of her panic would be on every gossip blog before she even reached her car. Her lawyer, Gerald Mitchell, walked a few steps behind her, silent, pale, and furious. He knew what the headlines would say. Judge Judy exposes fraudulent plaintiff live on camera. Karen Stevens caught in her own web. And he also knew his own name would be dragged through the mud alongside hers. Meanwhile, inside the courtroom, Robert Chen was still sitting quietly, unsure what to do next. The applause had ended, the cameras were off, and for the first time in months, the weight of fear began to lift from his chest. He looked around the empty benches, the sunlight catching the edges of the wooden seats, and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: safety. Mr. Chen, Judge Judy said softly as she gathered her papers, don't let this sour your kindness, the world still needs people like you. Robert nodded, his eyes moist. Thank you, Your Honor, I didn't think anyone would believe me. Judy gave a small smile. Truth doesn't need help to stand, lies do. He bowed slightly, a gesture of respect, before leaving the courtroom, the cameras waiting outside now focused on him instead. A journalist thrust a microphone in his face. Mr. Chen, how do you feel after the ruling? He hesitated. English wasn't his first language and he'd always struggled to find the right words, but this time they came easily. I feel free, he said, and grateful. Judge Judy, she saw the truth. The crowd clapped, and the clip would later become the closing shot of the episode, an old man's humble gratitude contrasted with the spectacle of a liar exposed. By the next morning, Karen Stevens was everywhere. Clips of her raising her arms during the testimony spread like wildfire. TikTok creators added mocking captions, neck brace, never heard of her. Memes flooded Twitter, Instagram, YouTube Shorts. Someone even auto-tuned her desperate "Please, Your Honor" into a remix titled The Karen Cry. Within 48 hours, it had over 10 million views. Her face, once carefully made up for sympathy, now symbolized deceit. Hashtags trended. Judge Judy exposed Karen. Justice for Robert Chen. Neck brace actress. Local news stations replayed the footage, analyzing every movement. Experts discussed psychological cues of deception, while body language specialists broke down her expressions frame by frame. Karen couldn't escape it, not online, not in person. Her employer, a small accounting firm, called her into the office the next day. She didn't even sit down before her boss slid a paper across the desk: termination notice. We can't have you representing clients after what's gone viral, he said quietly. Karen tried to argue, but the words sounded hollow even to her. She packed her desk in silence. At home, things were worse. Her husband, Paul Stevens, was packing the kitchen, his phone buzzing nonstop. He'd already fielded calls from neighbors, friends, even reporters pretending to be concerned citizens. You lied, Karen, he said finally, voice trembling with exhaustion. You told me it was real, that you were actually hurt. Karen dropped her purse on the counter. Paul, I was hurt, not physically but emotionally, financially. We needed the money. By lying, by dragging an old man through court, you could go to prison. Tears welled in her eyes. I didn't think it would go this far. Paul slammed his fist on the counter. You never think, Karen, you just do whatever gets attention. First the car accident, then the restaurant case, and now this. Everything you touch turns into chaos. She backed away, her throat tight. Please just help me fix it. He shook his head slowly. I don't think I can. That night he packed a bag and left. The house felt impossibly quiet, the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock, and her own shallow breathing echoing in the empty rooms. Meanwhile, Judge Judy's producers were celebrating. The episode had broken viewership records, the highest ratings in 3 years. Fans called it the greatest takedown in TV court history. Judy, though, wasn't celebrating. She sat in her office staring out the window, sipping her tea. For her, it wasn't entertainment, it was a reminder. People like Karen Stevens weren't rare. Every week, someone walked into her courtroom thinking they could twist the system, weaponize lies, and walk away richer. And every week, Judy made sure truth had its turn. Still, something about Robert Chen's quiet humility had stayed with her. She instructed her staff to send him a letter and an anonymous donation to help rebuild his store, which had lost months of income fighting the false claim. The legal system, however, was far from done with Karen. 3 weeks after the broadcast, 2 investigators knocked on her door. She opened it, thinking it was another reporter, but the badges said otherwise. Karen Stevens. Yes. You're under investigation for multiple counts of insurance fraud and perjury. You'll need to come with us. The color drained from her face. Now, I haven't done anything. The agent cut her off. Ma'am, we have the court footage, the falsified medical forms, and your previous settlements. You can come quietly or we can bring you in cuffs. The neighbors watched as she was led to the car, face pale, hands trembling. Someone across the street filmed it. Within hours, the clip was online. Karen from Judge Judy arrested. The comment sections were merciless. Could have seen that coming. Instant karma. She wanted fame, well, she got it. In the county jail, reality hit her in waves. The cold metal bench, the smell of disinfectant, the hollow thud of distant doors locking. For the first time in years, there were no lies to hide behind. Her court-appointed lawyer visited the next day. They've built a strong case, he said grimly. They've linked all your previous claims to the same Dr. Marcus Webb. He's already cooperating with prosecutors. If you don't make a deal, they'll hit you with everything: fraud, conspiracy, and perjury. Karen's voice cracked. How long would I go away? 5 years, maybe more. She buried her face in her hands. Please, I'll tell them everything. I'll testify against the doctor, just I can't go to prison. Across town, Robert Chen received a letter in the mail. It was from the court, a notice confirming Karen's arrest and the formal dismissal of all charges against him. Inside the envelope was another letter, handwritten, unsigned, but he recognized the tone instantly. Truth may bend, but it never breaks. You were brave to stand against deceit. Keep doing good, Mr. Chen. The world needs more of that. He smiled softly. Judge Judy had kept her promise. Business at his grocery store picked up again. Customers returned, many bringing flowers and baked goods. Some came just to shake his hand and say, "We saw you on TV, you were amazing." He'd laugh awkwardly each time. "I just told the truth," he'd say. Karen's trial began 6 months later. The courtroom looked different this time. No cameras, no audience, no sympathy. The same prosecutor who'd watched her on Judge Judy now stood ready to make her pay. Evidence was overwhelming. Dozens of documents, recorded testimonies, and videos showed her pattern of deception. Dr. Webb's confession sealed her fate. When the judge finally spoke, his tone was cold and final. Karen Stevens, this court sentences you to 3 years in state prison with eligibility for parole after 18 months. You will also pay restitution to the businesses you defrauded. The gavel struck. Karen's head fell into her hands as officers led her away. For once there were no cameras, no applause, just silence. Months later, a small segment aired on Judge Judy Revisited, a follow-up show highlighting notable cases. The clip showed Robert Chen smiling behind his store counter, surrounded by fresh produce and friendly faces. Justice, he said simply, always finds its way. The host nodded, and Karen Stevens. Robert hesitated. I hope she learns something. Maybe when you lose everything, you finally see what matters. The iron doors clanged shut behind Karen Stevens, and the sound reverberated through her bones like a verdict that never ended. Cold final absolute. The air smelled of bleach and concrete. The lights hummed with a sterile buzz that never seemed to stop. There were no cameras here, no stage lights, no sympathetic faces waiting to be convinced. Only time. And silence. Karen had imagined prison as chaos, yelling, violence, constant fear, but the truth was worse. It was monotony, a rhythm of regret repeating every hour, every minute, every breath. Wake up at 6, line up, eat, work, return, sleep, repeat. Days blurred into weeks, and weeks dissolved into a gray fog of sameness. The first few nights, she cried quietly into her pillow, remembering her life before it all fell apart, her home, her son's laughter, the smell of morning coffee, the soft weight of her favorite blanket. Now, everything she'd taken for granted had been replaced by cinderblock walls and a single thin mattress. The irony gnawed at her. For years, she had faked pain for money. Now, real pain, emotional and physical, had become her only companion. Her cellmate, Tanya Brooks, was a sharp-eyed woman in her late 40s serving time for credit card fraud. Unlike most inmates, Tanya wasn't cruel, she was curious. "You're the one from TV, right?" she asked one evening as they folded laundry in the prison workshop. Karen didn't answer. Tanya smirked. "Don't play dumb, I saw your episode before I came in. Judge Judy tore you apart, you're famous, girl." Karen winced. "I'm not famous, I'm infamous." Tanya chuckled. "Same difference in here." For the first time in months, Karen managed a small smile. "You know," Tanya continued, "most people in this place swear they're innocent. You're the first one who actually was caught on camera lying." Karen's stomach twisted. "Don't remind me." Tanya shrugged. "Hey, at least you got nowhere to go but up. Ain't no lower than rock bottom." That night, Karen lay awake staring at the ceiling. Rock bottom. It didn't feel like a place, it felt like a mirror. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, Karen began to adapt. She worked in the prison kitchen, scrubbing trays and peeling potatoes. At first, it felt humiliating, but after a while it started to feel grounding. The work was honest, the pay was non-existent, but for once every ounce of effort was real. Sometimes she'd overhear the guards whispering about her. "That's the Judge Judy lady, the fake whiplash one, didn't think she'd last a week." But she did. She endured the whispers, the stares, the jokes, because she knew deep down she deserved it. And in that brutal honesty, she began to find a strange kind of peace. One afternoon, while mopping the corridor floors, she was called into the warden's office. Inside sat a woman she hadn't expected to ever see again, Lisa Patel, an assistant producer from Judge Judy. Karen froze. "What are you doing here?" Lisa smiled kindly. "Relax, I'm not here to film you, I'm working on a follow-up documentary about real accountability. Your case came up. Judge Judy wanted me to check on you." Karen's chest tightened. She remembers me." "She remembers everyone," Lisa said softly, "but she asked me to tell you something." Lisa opened a small notebook and read aloud. "A liar punished isn't my joy. A liar reformed is my victory." Karen's eyes filled instantly. "She really said that?" Lisa nodded. "She doesn't hate you, Karen, she just hates what lies do to people." For the first time in 2 years, Karen cried not out of fear, not from shame, but from the fragile relief of being seen as something other than a villain. Over time, she began attending prison counseling sessions. At first she sat silently, arms crossed, unwilling to speak. But the counselor, Dr. Elaine Monroe, had seen thousands like her. She never pushed, she just waited. Then one afternoon, during a group session, another inmate named Rosa shared her story about how one lie to an insurance company had spiraled into multiple charges and lost years. The words hit Karen like a mirror cracking. When it was her turn, she finally spoke. Her voice trembled at first, but once she started, it poured out every lie, every fear, every selfish reason she had used to justify what she'd done. "I thought I was just bending the truth," she said softly. "I told myself everyone does it, that I was just unlucky to get caught, but I wasn't unlucky, I was arrogant." Dr. Monroe nodded. "The difference between a mistake and a pattern is honesty. You finally found yours." Karen wiped her eyes and whispered, "I just wish I could undo it." "You can't," the doctor said, "but you can rebuild what's left." Those words stuck with her for weeks. As months rolled on, Karen began volunteering for the prison's literacy program, helping other inmates write letters to their families. For the first time in years, she used her intelligence for something genuine. She wrote letters for mothers who couldn't spell, girlfriends who couldn't find the right words, even women trying to reconnect with their children. Each letter she wrote felt like a small step toward forgiveness, not from others but from herself. Outside the walls, the world had moved on. The internet forgot her for a while, new scandals replaced her. But the name Karen Stevens still lingered in memes and comment sections, a symbol of deceit and instant karma. Then one morning, a guard handed her an envelope. The handwriting was familiar, neat, deliberate, elegant. She opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Karen, you once stood in my courtroom asking for sympathy. Today, I offer you something more valuable: perspective. Use your time wisely. Regret is wasted if it doesn't change you. When you leave, live differently, help others see what lies cost. Judge Judy." Karen pressed the letter to her chest and sobbed silently. Time passed. Her parole hearing came sooner than she expected. Dr. Monroe testified on her behalf, describing her transformation, her efforts in literacy work, her mentorship of new inmates. The parole board deliberated for hours. When they finally called her back in, the lead officer smiled faintly. "Miss Stevens, we believe you've learned the hardest lesson the system can teach. You're granted parole, effective immediately." Karen's knees nearly gave out. After almost 2 years behind bars, the gates opened and she stepped into the sunlight. No cameras, no microphones, no applause, just freedom. Outside, an unfamiliar car was waiting. The driver rolled down the window. It was Lisa Patel again. "Need a ride?" she asked with a grin. Karen climbed in wordlessly, clutching the small bag of belongings the prison had given her. As they drove, Lisa said, "Judge Judy asked me to deliver one last message." Karen turned. "What is it this time?" Lisa smiled. "When the spotlight fades, your real character begins. Don't waste the second chance." Karen nodded slowly, staring out at the open road. The world looked different, louder, brighter, painfully alive. The next few months weren't easy. She stayed in a halfway house working at a local community center. The pay was barely enough to cover meals, but she didn't care. She spent her days helping others fill out real injury claims, making sure no one ever tried to fake pain like she once did. Sometimes people recognized her, a few mocked, others asked if she was the Karen from Judge Judy. She never denied it. "Yes," she'd say, "and that's why I'm here, to help you avoid my mistakes." Word spread. Slowly her reputation began to shift from a liar to a lesson. Meanwhile, across the country, Judge Judy sat in her office reviewing letters for a new outreach program, Truth First, a campaign promoting honesty in civil claims. One letter caught her attention. The handwriting was careful, shaky but familiar. It read, "Your Honor, you once said regret is wasted if it doesn't change you. I've tried to make that my mission. I speak at schools and rehabilitation programs now, warning others about the cost of one lie. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just letting you know your words reached me. Thank you for seeing the human behind the mistake. Karen Stevens." Judge Judy read it twice, then folded it neatly and placed it in her drawer beside a dozen other letters from people she once sentenced. "Maybe," she murmured to herself, "some people really do change." Back at the community center, Karen stood before a group of teenagers. She wore no makeup, no jewelry, no pretenses, just a plain white blouse and an open heart. She told them everything: the lies, the shame, the loss, the prison walls. And finally, the moment Judge Judy's words pierced her soul. When you cheat the truth, she said, voice trembling, you're not stealing money, you're stealing your own peace. And trust me, once you lose that, nothing else matters. The room was silent. Then one girl raised her hand and asked, do you ever wish you could go back? Karen smiled softly, every day, but I also know I wouldn't be who I am now if I hadn't fallen first.